Welcome to A Lot to Grow Through. I'm your host, Artist Jardins, and this is a space of thoughtful conversations on healing, growth, and the art of becoming. Here you'll understand you have to grow through it, not just go through it. Today we're talking about people pleasing, why it's so hard to say no, the cost of constant accommodation, and how to start putting yourself in the equation. Let's get into it. Let's start by understanding what people pleasing actually is, and more importantly, where it comes from. People pleasing isn't weakness, it's not a character deficiency, and it's not you being too nice. People pleasing is a survival strategy. It's something you've learned to do to stay safe, to keep peace, to avoid conflict or abandonment. For many of us, it developed in childhood. Maybe you had a parent whose mood dictated the household temperature, and you learned to manage their emotions to keep yourself safe. Unpredictable caregivers, so you became hyper-vigilant about others' needs to anticipate and prevent problems. Conditional love, where affection and approval came only when you were good, compliant, helpful. Punishment for having needs, so you learned your needs didn't matter, or maybe it developed later. In an abusive relationship where saying no meant danger, in a workplace where boundaries led to retaliation, in a community where conformity was survival. Here's what's important. You didn't choose people pleasing. You adapted to your environment. And at that time, it probably worked. It probably kept you safer, more connected, and less at risk. The problem is the strategy that protected you then is limiting you now. People pleasing started in my childhood and the household where I grew up. And a lot like other people pleasing patterns, it came from family dynamics, specifically my relationship with my mother. What I learned growing up is I was a benefit to others as long as I did my part in keeping them happy. That was the unspoken rule. My value, my worth, the affection I received, it all came with conditions. It came at a cost. And I learned by observing. That's how I've always learned. I watched, I paid attention, and I figured out, okay, if I do this, and if I keep this person happy, I get what I need. Now, did this survival strategy work for me at the time? In some ways, yes. I knew I had to do what I had to do because the person treating me this way was giving me a roof over my head. I wasn't yet an adult who could move out. I was dependent, so I adapted. But the thing is, it didn't keep me safe mentally. Physically, sure, I had shelter. I had what I needed to survive. But mentally, emotionally, I was learning that my needs didn't matter unless they fit someone else's agenda. I was learning that love was transactional, and I carried that into everything. I started to realize this was limiting me in my teenage years. That's when I started questioning life a lot more. My observations increased drastically. I started seeing patterns, not just in my household, but in how I moved through the world. And I started asking myself, is this how it has to be? Is this who I am? Or is this just what I learned to do to survive? That was the turning point when I realized this isn't me. This is what I had to become to get by. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. Now let's talk about what people pleasing actually costs you. When you're in people pleasing mode, you're constantly monitoring others' emotions. So is everything okay? Is anyone upset? Did I do something wrong? Overriding your own needs. So it's fine. I don't mind. Even when you do mind. Singing yes when you mean no. Because saying no feels dangerous, selfish, or wrong. Taking responsibility for others' feelings. If they're upset, it must be your fault and your job to fix it. Shrinking yourself. Making yourself smaller, quieter, less too much. This is exhausting, not just emotionally, but psychologically. When you're constantly in a state of hypervigilance about others' needs and reactions, your nervous system is activated. You're in a low-grade stress response all the time. Over time, this leads to burnout, when you have nothing left to give. Resentment, you're giving from empty, and you start to resent the people you're trying to please. Loss of self, you've been accommodating others for so long, you don't know what you actually want, need, or feel. Anxiety and depression, chronic self-abandonment takes a mental health toll. And physical symptoms, so headaches, digestive issues, chronic pain. Your body is trying to tell you something. People pleasing might look like kindness or selflessness on the outside, but it's not sustainable. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't maintain relationships built on your self abandonment. So, what did people pleasing actually cost me? It cost me my sense of self. I started teaching myself that what I wanted didn't matter unless it fit the needs of others. My preferences, my desires, my boundaries, none of it mattered if it didn't serve someone else. And the symptoms were everywhere. Emotional instability. I couldn't regulate because I was constantly managing everyone else's emotions instead of my own. I couldn't recognize genuine love because I was so used to conditional affection. I didn't know what unconditional looked like. I didn't trust it. And loss of self. I didn't know what I wanted, who I was, or what I even liked. I had spent so much time being what others needed that I had no idea who I was underneath that. And here's the big one. I learned that my anxiety disorder was birthed from my mother. When I traced everything back to the very beginning, all the patterns, all the fear, all the hypervigilance, it led back to that relationship. I can't remember the exact moment when the cost became clear, but I remember sitting alone with myself just thinking, why can't I have the same relationship with my mother that all these other boys and men have? Why does my mother's love always come at a cost? And I used to condition my mind by saying, no matter what, I'll be wrong as long as I can get my mother's affection. And let that sit for a second. I was willing to be wrong, to abandon myself, to silence my needs, just to get Scrap's perfection. But once the switch went off in my head, once I realized I'm no longer sacrificing myself, everything changed for the better. What made me realize I couldn't keep going this way was the same result every time I bent to their will. It went nowhere for my personal growth. I kept giving, kept accommodating, kept people pleasing, and I stayed stuck. Nothing changed. I didn't grow. I just kept shrinking. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? For me, the answer was no. Now let's connect people pleasing to something you might have heard about, the fawn response. You've probably heard of fight, flight, and freeze as trauma responses, but there's a fourth, fawn. Fawn response is appeasing, accommodating, placating, trying to make the threat person happy so they won't hurt you, befriending danger, self-abandonment as a survival tactic. Think about it like this. Fight. I'm going to protect myself by fighting back. Flight. I'm going to protect myself by running away. Freeze. I'm going to protect myself by shutting down. Fawn. I'm going to protect myself by making you like me. Fawning looks like agreeing with someone who's being aggressive towards you, laughing at jokes that hurt you, apologizing when you've done nothing wrong, anticipating and meeting others' needs before they ask, making yourself useful and or valuable so you won't be discarded, difficulty saying no even to unreasonable requests. Now, not all people pleasing is fawning, and you can be a people pleaser without having a trauma background. But if your people pleasing feels compulsive, like you can't say no, not just that it's hard, happening even with people who are unsafe or unkind, involves abandoning yourself completely, comes with intense fear of rejection or anger, that's likely a fawn response, and it deserves trauma-informed support. So ask yourself, do I people please even when I know it's harming me? Do I feel panic or terror when I imagine saying no? Do I people please more with certain types of people, authority figures, people who remind me of past harm? Did I learn people pleasing in an environment where it was genuinely dangerous to have needs? If yes, you're dealing with fawn response, not just being nice. So I just explained the fawn response, and I want to be honest with you. I don't personally relate to it. My people pleasing didn't feel compulsive in the way fawning does. It didn't happen with unsafe people. I didn't feel panic at the thought of saying no. And I think that's an important distinction to name because not all people pleasing is trauma-based fawning. In my experience, it was learned behavior. It was an adaptation, survival in a specific environment. But it wasn't the same as fawning, where you're appeasing someone to avoid immediate danger or harm. Now, That doesn't mean the fawn response isn't real or valid. If you heard that section and thought, well, that's me. If your people pleasing feels compulsive, if you do it even when people who are actively harming you, if saying no feels literally impossible, that's important information. That's your nervous system telling you it learned to survive by appeasing threats. And that's worth exploring with a trauma informed therapist. What I do understand is bending to the will of someone to ensure safety. I get that. I did that. But once I was no longer in that environment, once I had the autonomy and the awareness to choose differently, I was able to stop. It wasn't compulsive, it was conditional. And that's why understanding your why matters. Is your people pleasing learned behavior that you can unlearn with awareness and practice? Or is it a trauma response that needs deeper healing work? And both are valid. Both deserve support. They just require different approaches. Okay, so we understand where people pleasing comes from and what it costs. Now the hard question. How do you stop? Here's something that might sound harsh, but it's actually liberating. Part of growing up is learning to disappoint people. Not as a goal, not because you're trying to be difficult, but because you cannot live in an authentic life without sometimes disappointing others. Let's break down how to start. Step 1, practice the pattern. You can't change what you don't see. Start noticing, when do you automatically say yes? Who do you people please with most? What happens in your body when you consider saying no? Anxiety, panic, guilt? And what are you afraid will happen if you stop accommodating? Just notice, not judgment yet. Step 2, pause before responding. When someone asks you for something, practice, let me think about that and get back to you. This gives you time to check in with yourself. Do I actually want to do this? Do I have capacity for this? Am I saying yes out of obligation or genuine desire? You don't owe an immediate yes. And step 3, practice small no's. Now, don't start with big, terrifying no's. Start small. So examples, I prefer tea instead of coffee. I'm going to skip this event. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. Practice with people who are safe. Build the muscle. And step 4, tolerate discomfort. The truth is, saying no will feel terrible at first. You'll feel guilt. I should have said yes. Anxiety. What if they're mad? Shame. I'm being selfish. Fear. What if they leave? Those feelings are normal. They don't mean you're doing something wrong. Your nervous system is adjusting to a new pattern. Of course, it's uncomfortable. The discomfort is part of the process, not evidence you should stop. Step 5, let people have their feelings. If you say no and someone is disappointed, upset, or angry, that's their emotion to have. You're not responsible for managing their feelings about your boundaries. This doesn't mean you're indifferent to their feelings. It means you don't take responsibility for them. I hear that you're disappointed and I'm still not available. Both can be true. Step 6, differentiate healthy giving from people pleasing. Healthy giving is you have capacity. You genuinely want to help. You're not resentful. You can say no when you need to. People pleasing is you're giving from empty. You feel obligated, not willing. Resentment builds. And you can't say no even when you should. The goal isn't to stop being generous or kind. It's to make sure you're in the equation. So let me tell you about the first time I said no to someone and actually meant it. I was a young adult. I was actively working on boundaries, or trying to anyway. And it wasn't some calm, measured decision. It was a feeling of being fed up. It was going past emotions and just saying, F it. I choose me. That's what it took for me. I had to hit my limit. I had to get to the point where accommodating others hurt more than disappointing them did. What happened when I actually said no is that people were shocked. They were used to me being the yes man, the one who accommodates, the one who bends. And suddenly I wasn't doing that anymore. I had no care in the world. I felt good putting myself first. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't twisting myself into knots to keep someone else comfortable. I didn't feel guilt or fear. None. And I think that's because it took me hitting my limit to get there. By the time I said no, I was so done that nothing mattered to me. That might sound extreme, but sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you have to get to the point where you're not asking for permission anymore. You're not choosing yourself because you have to. What I learned from that experience is that self is first, and that's not selfish, it's necessary. I learned that my life, my mental health, my peace, that comes first. Because if I'm depleted, if I'm resentful, if I'm lost, I can't show up for anyone else anyway. And I learned that the people who actually care about you will adjust. They might be surprised. They might push back at first. But if they care, they'll respect your no. And the ones who don't tell you everything you need to know about what they valued in the relationship. My ability to say no has evolved since. I say it as smoothly as water flows down a stream. It's not a fight anymore. It's not a big emotional production. It's just no. That doesn't work for me. And I move on. That's the freedom on the other side of people pleasing. You get to exist without constantly negotiating your worth. I want to address the voice in your head that's probably saying, but if I stop people pleasing, I'll be selfish. Having needs doesn't make you selfish. Having boundaries doesn't make you mean. Disappointing people sometimes doesn't make you a bad person. Selfishness is I only care about myself and disregard everyone else. Self-care is I care about myself and others, and I can't show up well if I'm depleted. For many people pleasers, especially women and marginalized people, we've been taught that our needs are inherently too much, too selfish, too inconvenient. So we shrink, we accommodate, we disappear. You're allowed to exist. You're allowed to have needs. You're allowed to take up space. Your needs aren't less important than everyone else's. They're equally important. People who truly care about you will respect your no. They'll adjust. They'll understand. And people who can't tolerate your boundaries, that tells you something about their capacity for relationship, not about your worth. I don't struggle with feeling selfish when I have needs. Not at all. I'm the only one living my life, and no one can live it for me. Every decision I make will always consider me first, not in a way that disregards others, but in a way that recognizes if I don't prioritize myself, no one else is going to do it for me. The way I talk back to the voice that says I'm selfish is that I remind it that selfishness is okay and inevitable. We're all selfish to some degree. We all have needs. We all prioritize ourselves in some way. And pretending otherwise doesn't make you notable. It makes you a liar. The difference is whether your selfishness is balanced or not. Are you only thinking about yourself and bulldozing everyone else? That's a problem. But are you putting yourself in that equation? Are you considering your needs alongside others? That's not selfishness. That's self-preservation. There are people in my life who have helped me believe my needs matter. My best friend, my closest friends. They showed me what it looks like to have boundaries and still be loved. They didn't punish me for having needs. They didn't make me earn their care. And also, observing people, watching how they maneuver through life, seeing their good decisions and their bad decisions, learning for what works and what doesn't. I learned that the people who prioritize themselves aren't the ones falling apart. They're the ones who are stable, grounded, and actually able to show up for themselves. The most powerful shift in how I view my needs, realizing that my needs aren't negotiable. They're not something I have to justify. They're not something I have to earn. They just are. And I'm allowed to honor them. People pleasing is a survival strategy. It keeps you safe when you needed it. But the cost of chronic self-abandonment is high. Burnout, resentment, loss of self. Learning to say no to disappoint people, to put yourself in the equation, it's not selfishness. That's health. It will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel guilty. That's normal. But every time you say no when you mean no, every time you honor your own needs, you're teaching your nervous system, I matter, my needs matter, I'm worth protecting. So here's what I want you to understand if you're a people pleaser. People pleasing may fill a temporary void, but in the long run, it creates an unknown void that you'll be left with when the people no longer need you, when you no longer provide a benefit. You're not building relationships. You're building transactions. And the second you stop being useful, you'll see how conditional it all was. Here's what I wish someone had told me when I was deep in people pleasing. Blindly bending to the will of others takes you away from yourself. And if you're busy tending to everyone else, no one's left to tend to you. You can't outsource your own well-being. You can't hope that if you give enough, someone will finally give back. It doesn't work that way. So I want to encourage you to take a moment, self-reflect, and ask yourself, what's fueling my people pleasing? What's ruling your thoughts or emotion that has you in a constant routine of neglecting yourself? Is it fear of abandonment, fear of conflict, a belief that you're only valuable when you're useful? Name it, because you can't change what you don't see. And here's the question I want you to carry with yourself. What am I giving up within myself to make sure this person's life runs smoothly and mine doesn't? Sit with that and really sit with that, because your life matters as much as theirs. Your needs matters just as much as theirs. And you're allowed to stop sacrificing yourself. You're not here to be useful. You're here to be you. And the people who are meant for you will love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. If you're working on breaking the people-pleasing pattern, I'd love to hear from you. You can submit your story, reflections, and questions to letters@alottogrowthrough.com, either as an email or a voice message if that makes it easier. And visit alottogrowthrough.com for more information about the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. This podcast and future episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And until then, remember, healing isn't linear and you're doing better than you think. I'll see you next week.